etc. Pag-usapan natin. Pero guys, come on. I mean, nakita nyo, nasa labas na talaga eh. Hinahabol talaga nung player ng Japan. Ibang klase. Wow. Sana magkaroon ng Maharlika Fund for football in the Philippines. No? Sana yun ang meron tayo, no? Para mayroon talagang mangyari sa ating bansa. Now, I'll be quick about this at balikan natin lalo itong issue ng sovereign wealth fund soon, mga kameta. Ano? Nagpa-frame rate issue na naman tayo. Kailangan ko ayusin. Okay ba tayo dyan? Klaro ba tayo dyan, guys? Okay. Anyway, I'll just go quickly through this na lang. Now, the idea behind the sovereign wealth fund is simple, no? In many ways, it goes back to the Asian financial crisis and the debt crisis that faced yung mga developing countries, especially dito sa Asia. Nung 1997-1998, nagkaroon na Asian financial crisis kung saan biglang nagsilabasan itong mga foreign investors, beginning with Thailand, and then it had kind of a contagion effect, no? Nag-viral siya across East Asia. So that was a very, very traumatic experience. And I'll just give you an idea of how traumatic it is. I'll just show you some graphs and numbers. And I got this from a very good analysis by the governor of Reserve Bank of Australia. Very interesting. So to understand where this sovereign wealth fund issue comes from, you have to understand yung konteksto ng the trauma that the debt crisis of 1997 created. So these are like some of the graphs lang just, guys. So for instance, this is the exchange rate. Ito yung mga exchange rate nila versus dollar ng iba't ibang currency ng Indonesia, Thailand, Korea, Philippines, Malaysia. Tignan nyo talaga, by 1998, especially 1997, and then until 90, baksak talaga yung itong mga currencies nila. Significant depreciation, right? Really, really huge. You're looking at, for instance, a currency of Indonesia going from all the way here to all the way down here. I mean, total collapse. And in fact, that contributed to the collapse of the Suharto dictatorship in Indonesia in many ways. So it created a political revolution. That's how bad the effect was. And by some accounts, if you look at the Rishir Sharma book, for instance, on emerging markets, I think Indonesia had close to 20% GDP contraction. I mean, that's crazy. That's twice the level of what qualifies as an economic depression. No? And then you can also see here another interesting graph that shows what happens to the annual average growth rates of countries during the financial crisis. So you can see na medyo malaking impact ng mga countries. So countries like places like Hong Kong, economies like Hong Kong went from 5.2% economic growth to 0.8%. Places like Indonesia went from 7% growth to negative 0.4%. 6.4%, I'm sorry. Korea went from 8% to 1%. Malaysia from 9% to 0.8%. Philippines, not so much growth, so not so much decline, 3 to 1. But you can see, on average, East Asia went from 7.6% growth rate from 1987 to 1996. And then by 1997, 1999, during the financial crisis and its immediate aftermath, the growth rate went down to practically zero. No? And then you can see in the subsequent years, even the recovery years, the average growth rate was 60% of what it used to be in the peak time of 1987 to 1996. No? So like, really, kitang-kita nyo guys, ang traumatic ng impact ng Asian financial crisis. We need a completely different method to explain the roots of Asian financial crisis, but I can recommend to you guys a number of very, very interesting books on that. I think the best book on that is by an insider and Nobel Prize winner, Joseph Stiglitz. So the book, The Globalization as Discontents by Joseph Stiglitz, I think has very, very trenchant overview of what went wrong in the Asian financial crisis and what went wrong with yung mga policies ng World Bank, IMF, and other international financial institutions which were influenced by the United States, of course, and this is the Clinton era, no? So I really suggest you guys read this book by parang Joseph Stiglitz, no? Very good book to understand the roots of that. If you want a shorter version of understanding the roots of the Asian financial crisis from a much more political science, sociology, cultural, literary way, I really suggest Benedict Anderson's article on London Review of Books. Medyo mahaba siya. It's an essay, From Miracle to Crash. It's also a brilliant overview. Very, very well written, very easy to read of what went wrong during the Asian financial crisis and how it changed the game entirely dito sa Asia. So I'm just trying to explain to you guys anong genesis ng itong urge to have sovereign wealth funds, especially among us, a lot of our neighbors, no, in the East Asian neighborhood. So the Asian financial crisis really played an important role in that, and as I said, some good works to read, easy to read, nice to read, na hindi super technical, napaka-complicado style na this is one by Benedict Anderson, London Review of Books, From Miracle to Crash. I really suggest you guys read it. It's easy to read, just 7,000 words. That's just a journal article length. Or read the book by Joseph Stiglitz. Fantastic. 2 books give you an idea like how did it go so wrong. Tignan mo naman, total crash of exchange rate, total collapse of growth rate. I mean, from 7% growth to negative 6% growth. I mean, this is insane. I mean, grabe yung nangyari. Kawawa talaga yung mga countries nung late 1990s. So there was a lot of trauma around that. And that trauma encouraged a lot of Asian economies to build up their foreign exchange reserves. And in the meantime, on the other side of the world, yung mga Arab Gulf countries, no, yung mga oil exporting countries were also making a lot of extra money out of their oil exports and the dividends from the increase of oil prices. So suddenly they have a lot of money in their hand. But in economics, there's something called the Dutch disease, no? And this is not the kind of a cow or animal disease. This is what happened to Netherlands when they had a sudden jump, no, in the value of their currency because they had an oil export boom, or energy export boom. So that had a very negative impact on their exports because their exports became expensive, and later on it had a very negative impact on their economy, no? So on the other hand, in the case of Europe, they saw also the impact on Netherlands. When you make a lot of money and then suddenly you inject it domestically, that can have distortionary effect on your currency and make your exports less competitive, and by extension undermine your economy down the road. Sa Asia naman, yung Asian financial crisis was a big issue. So oil exporting countries naman, they also realized from many examples, including in the case of pre-revolution Persia, whereby you had a monarch, ejected a lot of money domestically, it created a lot of inflation, economic inequality, and created the condition for revolution. So the idea was, if you have a lot of extra money, you save it for the rainy days, or you put it in a certain fund, which you can reallocate or rechannel into more productive investments around the world. That was the whole idea. And if you look around the world, most of the big economies in the world and most of the wealthy countries on earth, they have sovereign wealth funds, especially those who have a lot of foreign exchange reserves, have a lot of surplus, trade surplus. So they have there's a huge reserve of money. Ang tanong, anong gagawin namin dito? So that's why the sovereign wealth fund became a bigger issue over the past 20 years. No, so many experiences: the Dutch disease issue in Europe, the oil boom in the Middle East, and some of the bad experiences when the oil boom created distortions internally, and also the Asian financial crisis. All of these things came together to create this kind of a new fashion, right? Which is, so if you look at it, so this is the list of sovereign wealth funds around the world. You look at it. So China is there. It makes sense for China because it's the biggest exporting nation on earth. And then you see Norway because it's a very wealthy country because of its natural gas and energy exports. And then you see the usual suspects, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, a lot of these countries. And then also you have a number of East Asian countries, right? So this is what's happening. A lot of our neighbors and a lot of the oil-rich countries from Europe, in the case of Norway, all the way to the Gulf countries, Persian Gulf countries, we see a lot of them are putting their money into the sovereign wealth funds because that's their way for them not only have to have money for rainy days, but to use their extra funds and extra money for productive investments around the world. No, now that sounds perfect in theory, right? Ang tanong, of course, is the devil is always in the details. Who is gonna manage this sovereign wealth fund? Where are you gonna get the money for the sovereign wealth fund? No, if you're Abu Dhabi or you're Qatar or you're China, for instance, you shouldn't have much of a big problem because you're an export rich country like China, or export-oriented country like China, earning trillions of dollars, right, in excess money because of you're exporting more than you're importing. In the case of Middle Eastern countries, of course, they're making ton of money with their oil exports and all, and they have very small population, right? So it's not like the money has to come back for domestic consumption. The population is so small, so there's a lot of excess money, and then if you inject it suddenly internally, it will create inflationary spike, no? Which is what happened across the Persian Gulf 40, 50 years ago in the 1970s, no? So we have wealthy export-oriented East Asian countries and oil exporting countries, wealthy oil exporting countries from Norway to the Middle East, all of them having these sovereign wealth funds. And these sovereign wealth funds can, you have their manager, they have their managers, and managers are supposed to know what they're doing. There's supposed to be some degree of accountability and transparency with where the money is going, how is it invested. And the idea is kaysa nakatenga lang yan sa Bangko Sentral mo or dun sa foreign exchange reserves mo, sana pwede mo ilagay yan sa mga iba't ibang investments, no? So it's kind of like a national hedge fund that you can use for investment for high ROI kind of prospects, return on investment prospects around the world. And this is what we see. Now, as I said, this is the theory. And some have been doing it pretty well, but there are many cases where the investments of sovereign wealth funds didn't go very well, for instance, no, or similar funds didn't go very well, no. There were a lot of sovereign wealth funds that went into dodgy investments in the Wall Street that went bust. And then more recently, of course, you have kind of, some say, vanity shopping, right? So you have the case, for instance, of the wealthy Gulf Arab countries, going and buying big clubs in Europe. So this is, for example, the latest one that made a lot of buzz and a lot of controversy, of course, in light of, what is the context we're talking about here, no? So, for instance, this is the case where Saudi Arabia was using a sovereign wealth fund, for instance, to buy Newcastle, Newcastle United soccer club. And in fairness, this club is doing now very well. I think they're top 5 in the league. They were like kind of mediocre and struggling, and now they're doing well because a lot of Saudi money was injected, but that money is from their sovereign wealth fund, right? Now, maybe they have this internal justification that this is good investment, good for their soft power, good for their branding, especially after, of course, Khashoggi and everything. And perhaps they feel this is also going to have good returns over time because the value of the club goes up as the sales of the t-shirts, tickets, everything go up. So I don't know, but some would see this more as like a vanity shopping. And then there are like more horror stories in not so far away countries, including neighboring Malaysia, which is not as wealthy as these Gulf Arab countries, but it's still an oil exporting country, especially with Petronas and all. But we saw how things went really south and ugly in the case of Malaysia, when the 1MDB, their sovereign wealth fund, and grabe yung mga corruption and all nangyari, no? In fact, I suggest you guys, of course, Najib, eventually the prime minister would go to, he'll be imprisoned and he loses power because of the scandal with 1MDB. And of course, that also had very negative impact in terms of image of Malaysia, in terms of its credit rating, in terms of, just trust and confidence in Malaysian institutions. Some money went to Wolf of Wall Street. That was crazy, no? Jolo ba yan? Yung some scandalous guy involved in this. Hindi ko alam kung nasaan siya. Hinahanap pa rin siya. This was like a high, roller kind of gambling guy, showboat guy. So it's insane. We saw that in Malaysia that their sovereign wealth fund experience was really horrific, right? And create a political crisis of greatest proportion. And of course, there are big concerns about where did billions of dollars go. Now, if you want more details, I suggest you guys read this book, very interesting book on the 1MDB scandal. It just came out the other year. I think it was among the best book of 2020 or so selected. So this book, $1 Billion Whale, actually it's multi-billion dollar, by Tom Wright and Bradley Hope. This is about this crazy situation with 1MDB in the case of Malaysia. So I suggest you guys to read more into this. So as I said, on surface, it looks fantastic and fun. Sometimes they're good investments. It makes sense to have kind of a better way of managing your surplus or excess money. Now, but that raises a question. Kamusta naman sa Pilipinas, right? Kamusta naman sa Pilipinas? Are we a oil-rich country like Norway or UAE? No. Are we a massive export-oriented country like China? No. Do we have significant foreign exchange reserves? Kinda yes, right? So let me show you this. So it's like, now of course this is not sovereign wealth fund per se, right? But it kind of gives you an idea, right, about the fact that Philippines kind of learned from some of our neighbors. Obviously, we're not in the top 15 or 20, but I saw that at some point our numbers were not too bad, no? So anyway, you'll see a strong correlation between countries that have very high levels of gold reserves, foreign exchange reserves, and countries also tend to have very large levels of very large sovereign wealth funds. No? I'm just trying to find this one. Okay. So again, so just to show a graph, if you look at this, countries that have big sovereign wealth funds also tend to be countries that have huge foreign exchange reserves, meaning a lot of trade surplus, right? They have very strong exports. And again, that's why my question is the Philippines that kind of country, right? Or should we be that kind of country so that it will make sense for us to have something like that? So this is, so these are the countries. So you can see, if I superimpose this to countries with biggest sovereign wealth funds, countries with the biggest foreign exchange reserves, you can see a strong correlation there, because you kind of need to get the money somewhere, right? Now, obviously, foreign exchange reserve is not the only place. There are other places. And in the case of the Philippines, one suggestion is perhaps we can get it from other places like, I don't know, GSIS, right? So this is the news. So you're talking about now almost pension funds and etc. No? So, for instance, the news came out recently na because we're not a kind of oil-rich exporting country, not even Malaysia level, and we're not a massive industrialized exporting country like China, so the idea is, where is the fund going to come for this, right? And of course, one way is the GSIS funds, no? The GSIS funds, no? Since we're not among the big countries when it comes to forex, we have to get money here and there. I mean, alangan you come up with a sovereign wealth fund, tapos ang laman lang nun, mga $50 million. Hindi naman pwede yan, di ba? We have to talk about a few $1 billion for it to really be respectably called a sovereign wealth fund, right? Otherwise, don't even try, right? Now, they're really credible experts, real economists, people I respect, no? Like Professor Enrico Villanueva, for instance, has some interesting take on this. I really suggest you guys check and follow him online. On Twitter, he has some interesting tweets. Let me show you some of his tweets. Ito yung mga gusto natin mga ekonomista, no? Hindi cloud chaser, hindi nakipagbardagulan, hindi pa blind item. Ito talaga mga totoo. Alam nila yung mga ginagawa nila. Very polite, very respectful. I had a slide back and forth with him on Twitter, but, all due respect to this kind of people. These are real people, no? So, please follow him. Very good idea. So, ayon sa kanya, why should the GSI, ayon sa kanya, so para magkaroon tayo ng sovereign wealth fund, we're willing to jeopardize yung ating yung GFI's financial health. Do GSIS and SSS have that much surplus over its actuarial liabilities to afford the contribution? Kasi syempre tataas yung mga expenses, etc. Especially as tumatanda yung mga contributors na iba. Should LBP and DPP reduce their development lending to accommodate? So yun nga yung point saan galing yung pera, since wala naman tayong masyadong malaking foreign exchange reserves at trade surplus? At kung kukunin naman ito dun sa iba, sa mga GSIs, mga ganyan, or SSS, etc., is this the best way forward? At yun yung isang critique na nakikita natin. Not necessarily criticism, but critique. There's a difference between criticism. Criticism is pwede nega lang. But critique is, it's based on some substantiated argument and evidence and data. And that's why people like, Enrico Villanueva, I think, he's a banker, he's an academic, he knows what he's talking about, right? So these are people I respect, and I really suggest you guys to follow them so that you get better ideas on this. So yun yung tanong. Now, obviously, there are people who say, don't worry, everything is fine, we'll take care of this, it's going to be transparent, it's going to be efficient, it's going to provide a vehicle for effective deployment of our surplus funds. Of course, isa dyan, mga favorite natin dyan, si Sir Joey Salceda, no? Na parating accurate yung mga kanyang prediction, whether kung tatakbo daw si Sara for president. Tapos sabi niya, maging 65, 68 likely yung dollar to peso. Yan, nasaan na tayo ngayon. Anyway, yan sa kanya, Don't worry, hindi maging 1MDB scandal, sabi ni Salceda. Don't worry about it. Yung proposed 275 billion pesos na Maharlika Wealth Fund, which is like roughly what, $5 billion, no, has enough safeguards daw to prevent the embezzlement na nangyari dun sa 1MDB ng Malaysia set up a decade earlier, no? And the scandal, of course, came out in 2016, no? So ayon sa kanya, huwag kayong mag-alala, everything is fine, there will be safeguards, etc. But there are many people also from the minority, from different camps, experts who are saying, well, let's see. Let's not jump into it. Akin naman, there's also another question here. Is this, I mean, what is really the intention behind this? Is the intention behind this really to come up with optimal mechanisms to make the most out of our whatever resources we have, our limited surplus we have? Or ano naman to, mga performative Dolomite style na naman to, na parang, ay, social tayo, may sovereign wealth fund, mga ganun. So, I'm withholding judgment. I want to see more analysis. I want to see more data on this. But so far, guys, ito yung mga pros and cons na nakita natin. As I said, I'm here to provide you guys an overview and analysis and understanding of this issue. It's up to you guys to make a judgment on yourself. I'm not here to bash anyone. I'm here to just give you a different perspective. So please check it there. Now, obviously, you can see that I have some skepticism here, but I also see the point that in theory it makes sense. So the devil is in details, and we want to see more details coming in, especially about seeing yung board, how efficient it is, at ano yung mga transparency mechanism, how much disruption it could create to GSIs and SSS if there's a redeployment of funds. So marami mga bagay-bagay dyan dito, mga kameta. Alright? And just to be clear, I'm not posing here as an economist. I'm explaining to you this as, you know, because this is basic knowledge to any social scientist, right? So I'm explaining this as a social scientist. And ito yung mga pinag-aralan natin when we were studying international political economy and teaching those kind of courses. And of course, also as an international journalist, right? So we follow up on these issues. My first book was on economics, right? Economics of the Arab uprisings, what are the economic factors behind it, etc. It was reviewed by economists, etc. So for a very long time, we have been steeped in this kind of discussions. No? You don't have to be an economist per se to have familiarity with these issues. All right. Are there any questions, mga kameta? Interesting, no? Interesting. I hope hindi kayo masyado na bored. Alam ko hindi tayo nagbardagulan masyado, hindi tayo nag-marites masyado, but I just hope na ma-appreciate niyo yung mga ganitong usapan para makikita niyo naman saan tayo galing. Alright? Oh. Ano ba? Dolomite ba? Or social ba? Or sensible ba? Yung ganyan. Yan ang mga tanong natin. Diba? Kaya I see bakit controversial siya. But I'm withholding a final judgment because I'm waiting for more clarity on the mechanics, on the dynamics, and on the overall objective and practicability and sustainability of this sovereign wealth fund. Kasi otherwise, ano lang yan? Parang ano lang yan, di ba? Alam niya, performative na yan, di ba? And, well, we still have an inflation issue. We still have problems when it comes to food security, energy security. We have worries about our economic growth prospects down the road. So, ano yan? Why are we making this? Should this be a priority? Aren't they more important things? Or maybe this could actually help us. Anyway, maraming salamat. Let me thank Mitch Tengcho, Eden Olonan, Noemi Tablate, Michael Uy, all of these very supportive friends of ours. Of course, ma'am, Jocelyn Lomberio. May tanong si Michael. Well, this is actually a bill that was, so it's a legislative initiative, and obviously it seems to have the support of the president. So it has a high chance of getting passed, no? But in the meantime, we have to have a proper discussion about it and figure out where we're going, no? But in the meantime, sabi ko, ito po yung say natin. I'm not here to bash the government. I'm not here to bash the critics of the government. I'm here to give you an overview, a history, a background of ano itong ambag ng mga sovereign wealth fund na yan, at bakit natin sila pinag-usapan. And in theory, what are the good things about them? And in reality, what can go wrong? And anong mga safeguards na kailangan natin? Yun lang naman eh. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much, guys. And talk to you soon. God bless. Thank you very much.